What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, we're going to do another penetration test with the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. We're going to shoot some expanding bullets at some Douglas Fir 2x10 framing joists that I got at my local Home Depot, and I cut them down to 1 foot lengths and I screwed them all together. I put one screw in each corner, and there's a total of 9 boards here. So we're going to see how deep these 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum expanding bullets can penetrate into the 2x10s. We're going to see how many boards they can penetrate, and we're going to compare the different loads to see which ones penetrated the deepest and which ones performed the best. We're going to recover the bullets and weigh them to see what kind of weight retention we got. We're going to measure the expansion to see how much the bullets expanded. And we're also going to see if the core and jacket stayed together. We're going to examine the wound channels in the wood to see which ones did the most damage. And this will give us a good comparison between the different loads to see which ones are the best and which are the worst. And what I'm going to do with this test is I'm going to put some sandbags behind the wood because the wood is fairly light, and I'm afraid that because it's so light and the 500 Magnum generates so much energy that it's going to toss the wood around between shots. So I'm going to put 2 sandbags behind the 2x10s to provide a rigid backstop that's 100 pounds of sand, and that'll prevent the wood from being blown backwards with each shot. So we're going to test 3 different types of expanding bullets in this video, and the first load that we're going to test is the Buffalo Bore 400 grain jacketed flat nose soft point, traveling at 1,675 feet per second and generating 2,600 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And this is a 400 grain Sierra jacketed flat nose bullet in this load, and it's marketed for controlled expansion and deep penetration. And the second load that we're going to test is a Hornady 300 grain flex tip traveling at 2,075 feet per second and generating 2,800 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And that's about the same amount of energy as a 30-06 or a 7mm Rem Mag. And this 300 grain flex tip from Hornady is one of the first 500 Magnum commercial loads to be released for the 500 Smith & Wesson. When I first bought my 500 Magnum over 10 years ago, this was one of the most popular loads on the market. And finally, we're going to test the 350 grain XTP hollow point, traveling at 1,900 feet per second and generating 2,800 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And so I'm curious to see how this hollow point is going to perform inside of 2x10s. And I'm also curious to see how the 300 grain flex tip will perform, which is a very high velocity bullet. And it'll also be interesting to see how the Buffalo Bore 400 grain Sierra jacketed flat nose will perform, whether it's going to actually penetrate deep like they're marketing it to be, or is it going to fall short of expectations. So stick around and we're going to find out how these popular 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum bullets perform inside of Douglas Fir 2x10s. And just for comparison, the last expanding bullet that I tested in 2x10s was the Hornady 500 grain XTP traveling at 1,425 feet per second. And that one penetrated around 4 to 5 2x10s. So that's the best penetrating lead core expanding bullet that I've tested out of the 500 Magnum. And I've also tested a solid copper expanding bullet from Barnes, and it was a Barnes XPB, and that one was a Buffalo Bore load, and it was traveling around 1900 feet per second, and that one penetrated through 9 2x10's. That one penetrated really deep. So we'll see how these classic Hornady loads and the Buffalo Bore Sierra perform inside of 2x10's. So without further delay, let's get started with our test. All right, guys, I wanted to just show you the initial damage to the wood here. And what actually happened was when I took my first shots with the 300 grain flex tip and the 350 grain XTP, it actually blew off this whole chunk of wood here. Okay, check this out. So this wood was here, and what happened was, this was my first shot with the Buffalo Bore 400 grain Sierra bullet. And then my second shot was down here. That was with the Hornady flex tip, 300 grain. And down here was my third shot with the 350 grain XTP. And when I took this shot here with the 350 grain XTP, it completely blew off this whole chunk of wood here, okay? So that was pretty insane. And then what I did was I took two more shots. One was with the 300 grain flex tip up here, and then I took another one with the 350 grain XTP up here, okay? Because I was a little bit concerned that the fact that I hit a little bit on the side of the wood, maybe it would have affected the results. So I wanted to get him in the center here. So this was the 400 grain Buffalo Bore Sierra, 300 grain Hornady flex tip, 350 grain Hornady XTP, 350 grain Hornady XTP, and then right here was the 300 grain Hornady flex tip. And I want to just show you how much pieces of wood that these shots split, okay? You could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of wood already split, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this apart when I get home, and we're gonna go through each board one by one, and we're gonna see exactly what happened. We're gonna see how many boards these bullets went through, and then we're gonna see what kind of expansion we got, what kind of wound channel we got, and we're gonna see how much weight retention we got, and whether the bullets held together or whether they blew apart, okay? Whether the jacket separated from the core or whether they stayed together, because that's very important. And so I wanted to just show you the wound channel here from the 300 grain Hornady flex tip. And you can see the little plastic tip here embedded in the first board. Okay, so it lost the plastic tip in the first board. Went through the first board, second board, third board, fourth board, and it was actually stuck in the fifth board right here, okay? Right there is where I found it. And then when I took my second shot, when I took the shot with the 350 grain down here, it blew off this entire piece of wood, and I lost the bullet, okay? Because I didn't take the bullet out, it was stuck right there. And when this 350 grain bullet blew off the whole side here, I lost that bullet, okay? But it looks like initial results, the 300 grain Hornady flex tip was able to penetrate through 4 pieces of 2x10. This is Douglas Fir 2x10, and it got stuck in the 5th board, which is really good. That's very good penetration. And I want to just show you guys the first shot that I took with the 350 grain XTP from Hornady, traveling at 1900 feet per second. I want to show you, it looks like it got embedded in the 3rd board, but there's this giant knot over here, okay, in the 2nd board. And I'm thinking that this knot slowed down the penetration. All right, so that's why I took another shot up here. And up here, there's no knots. I went through each board and I made sure that there were no knots in this area that I scribed off with my pen. This area had no knots. This was fresh wood with no knots or any screws or anything like that. And that's what I always do when I do these tests. I go through each board and I try to find boards that don't have any knots. So this way we get an accurate result, okay? But so far, it looks like the 300 grain flex tip from Hornady was able to penetrate through 4 2x10's. And it looks like the 350 grain XTP got stuck in the 3rd board. You could see it sitting in there, okay? But look at the size of this hole from that 350 grain XTP, and this is a hollow point, okay? We're gonna take these boards apart and see exactly what happened with these shots here. But I'm guessing that they probably penetrated around 4 or 5 boards. Initially, that's my initial guesstimate, okay? Because when I took the first shot with the 400 grain Buffalo Bore, it cracked 5 boards. It cracked all of these boards, okay? So I'm guessing the 400 grain may have penetrated through 5, maybe 6 boards. And we're gonna see what the 350 grain XTP hollow point did and the 300 grain flex tip did. So stay tuned and let's see what happened. Alright guys, so I unscrewed all the boards and I want to go through them one by one and show you guys exactly what happened. I want to show you how deep all these bullets penetrated. I want to show you the wound channel in the wood and the exit holes. And after I do that, I'm going to weigh all of the bullets and take some measurements to see what kind of expansion we got and how much weight retention we got. And we're also going to check to see if the jacket and core stayed together. So stay tuned. These are Douglas Fir 2x10's. These are standard framing 2x10's that you would use to build a house with. So the bullet that penetrated the least was actually the one that I was expecting to penetrate the deepest. And that was the Buffalo Bore 400 grain jacketed flat nose soft point traveling at 1,675 feet per second. I was expecting that one to penetrate the most amount of 2x10's, but it actually penetrated the least. And it only penetrated 3 2x10's, which is pretty good, but I was expecting it to go through at least 4, maybe 5 or 6, because Buffalo Bore markets this particular load as being very deep penetrating, and that bullet is supposed to be a deep penetrating bullet for very controlled expansion. And what I saw in this test is quite the opposite. It did not have any controlled expansion. It was a very rapid expansion, and it actually expanded the same amount as the Hornady hollow point and the flex tip. So I was very disappointed by this result with the Buffalo Bore. And that's not to say anything negative about Buffalo Bore. It's just that I was expecting this bullet to penetrate a lot more than it did. And, you know, especially it being marketed as a deep penetrating, controlled expansion bullet from Buffalo Bore and also from Sierra, because Sierra is actually the company that makes that 400 grain soft point. You know, they both of them, Buffalo Bore and Sierra, market that bullet as being a deep penetrating bullet, but it penetrated less than your standard, you know, Hornady factory loadings. Okay, so the Hornady 300 grain flex tip traveling at 2,075 feet per second and the Hornady 350 grain XTP hollow point traveling at 1,900 feet per second both penetrated 4 Douglas Fir 2x10's, okay? And they cleanly penetrated 4 of them. And the Buffalo Bore 400 grain jacketed flat nose only penetrated through 3. So very disappointing results with the Buffalo Bore, but very good results with the Hornady. I was actually expecting the Hornady hollow point and the Hornady FTX to penetrate less than what it did. You know, I was especially the hollow point. I was not expecting the 350 grain hollow point to penetrate through 4 2x10's. I was expecting maybe 2 or 3. So interesting results there. And same thing with the 300 grain flex tip. That one had pretty deep penetration. That one penetrated 4.5 boards. Very good penetration. So if you guys watch my first test that I did with the 500 with 2x10's, the 500 grain XTP from Hornady traveling at 1400 feet per second also penetrated 4 2x10's. So it seems like no matter which Hornady bullet you use, they're all going to pretty much penetrate around the same, whether it's the flex tip, the XTP hollow point, or the 500 grain XTP flat nose. Okay, all 3 of those Hornady expanding bullets for the 500 Magnum penetrated the same amount inside of Douglas Fir 2x10's. Now, obviously, inside of other mediums, they could perform slightly differently. But with all the testing I've done, they all pretty much penetrate around the same. No matter what media I use, they penetrate roughly the same. And that's very interesting because you would think that the 350 grain hollow point would penetrate a lot less. Same thing with the 300 grain FTX, which is also a hollow point with a plastic tip on the top for better ballistics coefficient. I was expecting these two to go only through maybe 2 or 3 boards, but they went through 4 boards, so that's very impressive penetration. Now, just to give you guys a comparison to other cartridges that I've tested inside of Douglas Fir 2x10's, I shot my Smith & Wesson Model 629 N-Frame Performance Center with the 2 5/8 inch barrel 44 Magnum with hard cast bear loads, 300 grain hard cast bear loads. It penetrated through 4 2x10's. And the Buffalo Bore 265 grain mono metals penetrated through 3.5 2x10's. So the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum with my 6.5 inch barreled revolver is able to penetrate the same amount of wood with expanding bullets as a 44 Magnum can with solids, okay, with solid copper or hard cast lead. Okay, so that's very impressive, guys. That's very impressive. The fact that the 500 Magnum can penetrate the same amount with expanding bullets as a 44 Magnum can with solids, that's impressive. So the 500 Magnum basically has double the penetration of a 44 Magnum. So that's very impressive results with the 500 Magnum. But again, I was a little bit disappointed with that 400 grain jacketed flat nose. I was expecting it to go through maybe 5 boards because it is marketed for deep penetration, and it only went through 3. And I was expecting it to go through 5 because if you remember, I showed you guys the video. There was that big crack in the 5th board, and upon further inspection, the reason why that 5th board cracked was just from the impact, from the muzzle energy. The energy of the bullet just hitting the wood cracked it, okay? It wasn't because it penetrated through 5 boards. It's just the impact cracked the wood. So, all right, guys, so I'm going to go through these one by one. This is the first board. This was the 400 grain Buffalo Bore. This was the 350 grain Hornady XTP hollow point, and this was the Hornady 300 grain flex tip. This hole here was the 300 grain flex tip from Hornady, and this was the 350 grain hollow point from Hornady. Okay, so this was the back of the first board. You can see the exit holes. They're not that big just yet, but you'll start to see them expand in the second and third boards. So all of them penetrated the first board. Here's the second board. Okay, you can start to see the holes getting a little bit larger as the bullets are expanding a little bit. Now moving on to the third board, this is where things start to get interesting. So this was that 350 grain XTP hollow point. Look at the size of this hole, guys. Absolutely massive hole. You could see compared to my thumb, and I have big hands. This is probably, I would say, 1.5 inches in diameter, this hole here. You could see the bullet stuck in there. I'm going to pull that bullet out, and we're going to weigh it and measure it, see what kind of expansion we got. But you can actually see that the wood was cracked. The third board was cracked, okay, when I took it apart. And look at the wound channel here from the 400 grain Buffalo Bore. Huge wound channel there compared to my finger. Look at that. You know, you're looking at 1.5 inch wound channel here, okay? And then here you have the wound channel from the 300 grain flex tip, okay? But as you can see, we hit the knot in the second and first board, and that stopped the hollow point in the third board on this particular shot. Now, looking at the back of the second board, you can see it split over here. And you can see this huge exit hole here from that 400 grain Buffalo Bore. You can see this big exit hole here from the 300 grain flex tip. Okay, very interesting results here. So here we have the fourth board, and you can see the Buffalo Bore 400 grain jacketed flat nose is stuck in the fourth board. Okay, this is exactly how I found it. It was stuck right there in the front, and you can see it just barely penetrated the surface of the fourth board. So I'm going to say it penetrated only 3 boards, and here's what it looks like. Okay, you can see it mushroomed up quite a bit. Now again, we were shooting at a very close distance, only about 5 yards away. So who knows, maybe this would have penetrated a little deeper if we were a little bit further away. But look at how big it expanded. I mean, this expansion is huge. You know, you're looking at about 3/4 of an inch, I would say, in terms of expansion. This looks like a 12 gauge slug right now. Massive amount of expansion on this bullet. But we're going to take some measurements. We're going to weigh it, see what kind of weight retention we had. So I'll just show you guys the big hole that it left in the wood here in the fourth board. Okay, huge hole here. I mean, this is just a massive hole, and it didn't penetrate past the fourth board at all. Okay, there's no dent or anything on the back. Okay, it didn't penetrate at all. All right, and then here we have the 2 holes up here from the Hornady's, and the hole on the left is the 300 grain flex tip. The hole here on the right is the 350 grain XTP hollow point, and then here we have the hole from the other 300 grain flex tip. And then here you can see a dent from the 350 grain hollow point. Okay, I just want to show you guys the wound channel here from the 300 grain flex tip. Look at the size of that wound channel, guys. I can fit my whole thumb in that wound channel here through this wood. Very impressive. Okay, so now here's where things get really interesting, is the fifth board. Okay, look at these exit holes on the back of the fourth board. Huge exit holes here. Now, moving on to the fifth board, this is where things get interesting. So here we have the 300 grain flex tip. Okay. And you can see it held together pretty well. The jacket and the core stayed together. And I found this one just right here in the fifth board right there. And then here we have the 350 grain hollow point, and it's still stuck in the wood here. Okay, so here's the 350 grain hollow point, and it's all mangled up in there. It's all deformed, but you can see a huge chunk of the jacket is like peeled off to the side, but it's embedded in there. I'm going to pull it out. So interesting results here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh all of these bullets, and we're going to see what kind of weight retention we got. And I'm going to take some measurements to see what kind of expansion we got. But the Hornady bullets performed very well. They penetrated through 4 Douglas Fir 2x10's. And that's the same amount as the previous Hornadys that I've tested in the past. The 500 grain XTP also penetrated through 4 2x10's. And both of these Hornadys, the 300 grain flex tip and the 350 grain XTP hollow point, both penetrated through 4 2x10's. The Buffalo Bore only penetrated through 3, a little bit disappointing, but even penetrating 3 2x10's is very impressive for a soft bullet, okay, a soft nose bullet. So we're gonna weigh these bullets now, see what kind of weight retention we got, and we're gonna take some measurements and see what kind of expansion we got, so stay tuned. Alright guys, so let's weigh these bullets and see what kind of weight retention we got. I got my reloading scale here, got my 100-gram weight just to check the zero. We got 100 grams on the scale. So let's start weighing these bullets. So here we got the 2 300 grain flex tips. We got one of them, 289 grains of weight retention, so it only lost 11 grains. That's really good. That's about 96% weight retention. Now we got the other 300 grain flex tip, 268 grains, so it only lost about 32 grains. That's really good weight retention. That's about 90% weight retention, okay? Moving on to the 350 grain hollow points, and these had really good weight retention, 347 grains, so only lost 3 grains. That's 99% weight retention. And here's the other one, 348.5 grains, only lost 1 grain. That's very impressive. Now finally, we got the 400 grain jacketed flat nose soft point from Buffalo Bore. This is a Sierra bullet. Let's weigh this guy and see what happened. 390 grains. That's really good. That's about 97% weight retention. So very good. So all these bullets had really good weight retention. It seems like the hollow points actually had the best weight retention, which is very interesting. And you could see the expansion on these hollow points was absolutely massive. So I'm going to get my calipers now, and we're going to take some measurements to see what kind of expansion we got. Alright guys, so I want to show you guys these bullets up close and measure them to see what kind of expansion we got. So this was the 400 grain Buffalo Bore jacketed flat nose. I want to show you guys up close what happened to it. And look at how the jacket peeled back all around the base of the bullet, and it mushroomed up quite a bit. And again, this is a very close distance. We were at 5 yards, so I would guess that maybe at 25 yards or even further, maybe if you had a scope on this gun and you shot it at 50 yards, the jacket wouldn't peel back as much and you would get a little bit better penetration possibly. But look at how that jacket peeled all the way back, and look at the expansion on this bullet here. I mean, this is just a huge amount of expansion here, and I measured about 1 inch of expansion. I'm going to show you guys exactly right now, about 0.95 inches of expansion here, okay, with the 400 grain Sierra bullet. So moving on to the 350 grain hollow points, these expanded the most actually, and I want to show you guys how the jacket just totally peeled back and off the side of the base here. I mean, look at that very violent expansion. You can see right here how one side of the jacket just came completely back and beyond the base, okay, and these were going at 1900 feet per second, and we were shooting at 5 yards, so that's why you get that extreme amount of expansion, okay? At further distances, the expansion would have been a little bit less, but very interesting results here. So I want to just measure this for you guys, and here we got 0.85 inches of expansion. That is just absolutely devastating. Any kind of soft tissue that you hit with this bullet is going to be destroyed completely, and it's going to leave a huge exit hole, and whatever you hit with this is not going to survive very long. Moving on to the other 350 grain bullet, this one had the most amount of expansion of all of the bullets, and this one expanded over an inch. Okay, look at that, 1.02 inches, 1.03. Very impressive. Look at this jacket here, how the jacket just peeled off the side. Very interesting. Okay, so you had like one side of the bullet completely just go back like this, kind of almost like it got hit by something in the wood, but that's just the way these hollow points expand sometimes. They don't expand uniformly always. They expand to the right side of the bullet or the left side. They don't always create a perfect mushroom, even if you're shooting at a perfect angle. Okay, they usually expand to one side, and you can see how it mostly expanded on this right side of the bullet, and then the other side of the bullet was mostly intact. But the jacket is pretty thick. It's a pretty thick copper jacket. I'm trying to bend it now, and I can't. You know, it's pretty thick jacket here on this XTP 350 grain hollow point. So massive amount of expansion with these hollow points here, and also with the 400 grain Sierra. And now the 300 grain XTP bullets, they also had a lot of expansion, about 0.8 inches. So here we have one 0.88 inches. Okay, that's a lot of expansion, guys. Almost an inch of expansion. It's absolutely massive expansion right here. Okay, and these bullets also very much intact. Jacket and core are together. Okay, you can see the jacket peeled back quite a bit here. You can see right here how the jacket just peeled completely back. Look at that, guys. Very impressive bullets here from Hornady. I love the XTP and the FTX bullets from Hornady. I've had really good results in all my penetration tests with them. Whether it's the 500 Magnum or 44 Magnum, they perform very well. Here's the other 300 grain FTX bullet, and this one is 0.82 inches of expansion. It's a lot of expansion, guys. Look at this. Jacket peeled back pretty far. So that's pretty much it for this penetration test. I'm going to be doing more 500 Magnum penetration tests with 2x10's and other media. But that's all I have for now. So thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 P's. Prepare, practice, and persevere.